Hello and welcome to What Culture Horror with myself, Andrew Pollard. I hope you're well. I hope you're good. I hope your week is going as well as possible. Now, as we continue to look at more review videos here at What Culture Horror, today we've got quite the treat with Hammer's new 4K 5-disc release of Brian Clemens' Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. And while on the topic of reviews, be sure to check out our recent reviews of Lowell Dean's wrestling-infused horror dark match, Ryan Kruger's ooey gooey street trash sequel, and the Minka Kelly fronted supernatural horror Blackwater Lane. They are elsewhere on the channel. Go and check them out. Let us know what you think about them. So, Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. For full disclosure, this is something I've been looking forward to talking about ever since the discs arrived through my letterbox a little while ago. Now, for those not familiar with Captain Kronos, it's a 1974 movie, as mentioned, from Brian Clemens, the British screenwriter and producer best known for heavy hitters such as The Professionals and The Avengers. No, not those Avengers, but the hugely popular British spy series of the 1960s. For whatever reason, Captain Kronos was Brian Clemens' only directing credit, which is a major shame, as this is just such a fun film, for those with certain tastes, that is. It's probably worth stating that Captain Kronos isn't exactly, I'd say, full-on intense horror, but it's still nonetheless a fantastic slice of classic Hammer cinema. Though unfortunately it's a film that flopped at the time of its release, being one of those movies released at a time when, I mean, let's face it, Hammer's boom period was done. It wasn't even starting to wane. It was pretty much done by then. It also didn't help that the film, while it was filmed in 1972 and planned for release that year, yeah, it ultimately was delayed for 2 years by the time things actually, got to the screen, only finally being released in 1974. Despite that, though, many look at Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter as the last great Hammer film of those famed days when Hammer was king. And I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. But then I do like this sort of thing, so for those who like this sort of thing, they will like this sort of thing. As for the plot, you've got Horst Jansen, who plays the eponymous Kronos, who, as the title would suggest, is indeed a vampire hunter. Accompanied by his trusty pal, Professor Grost, as played by a brilliant John Carter, Kronos is called to a village who have a little bit of their own vampire problem. The catch here, though, is that the people who well, let's say they're not being drained of blood, but instead are being drained of their youth. Yes, after all, as Kronos at one point points out in this film, there are many varieties of vampire, meaning this is a nice change from the standard, blood-sucking vampires that are so commonplace throughout horror. Along the way, Kronos and Gross, they find Carla, a gypsy girl locked in some stocks, who ends up helping them in their quest, not to mention, of course, becomes a love interest for Kronos. Even better, Carla is played by the great Caroline Munro, who is, just such a big-time horror favourite over the years, thanks to, largely to a whole bunch of Hammer horror roles. Plus, you've got the likes of Maniac, Slaughter High, that Caroline Munro was in as well. Although Slaughter High, I do always get a kick out of how that film did its best to portray Caroline Munro as a teenage high school student during its opening act, even though I think at the time of filming she was 35 years of age. You gotta love the movies, man. Of course, Caroline is also one of the most famous Bond girls, playing Naomi in The Spy Who Loved Me, which I'm sure, if I remember rightly, that was a role she got because she had to turn down a role in Superman, Richard Donner's Superman, to take on the Spy Who Loved Me role, which is a nice little bit of trivia there for you. Anyway, that's the key players and the loose plot points here, with Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter being a folk horror adventure of sorts, I guess is one way to describe it. There's swashbuckling sword fights. There's a shady sense of mystery to what we get to see play out. There's a brilliant brothership between Kronos and Grost that's kind of, you feel the bond between them. It's not kind of, you don't get hit around the head with them, and you don't get too much explanation as to why. You know that these guys have been pals for the longest time and that they're really, really close pals. There's just a really nice feel of world building here as well in Captain Kronos. There's even the supporting characters, they all have a little bit of intrigue to them. You want to learn more about these characters and their stories. Let's face it. For those not aware as well, the plan was back in 1974 when this was released, or even before that, 1972 when it was released. When it was filmed, the plan was that Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter was originally meant to kickstart a new big franchise for Hammer. That is, of course, until the film bombed on its release, and all of those plans were scrapped. So that's why when you watch this film, it's like, oh, that's an interesting character I'd like to see more of, and that. Oh, and where are they off to there, and what's over there? Yeah, the plan was to do more of these films or focus on that sort of stuff, but sadly, we did not get anything. Of course, with a release like this one that comes 51 years after Captain Kronos was first released, the biggest selling point here for a lot of people will be what else comes with the film. You may have seen the film before, you may own the film already, So why would you go and buy it again? That's where all the extra little bits come in. First and foremost, the new release, as I mentioned, it is a 5-disc affair, a 5-disc rascal featuring 2 UHD discs, 4Ks, 3 standard Blu-ray ones, and also there's 3 different versions of the film, all of which are presented in swanky 4K. There is the widescreen UK theatrical release, the widescreen US theatrical release, and the as-filmed version, which that one might actually be my favourite of the bunch, which I might be in the minority there, but I don't know, something I get a kick out of that sort of ratio. Now, all 3 of these versions, they look absolutely fantastic, especially when you check out a screen-to-screen comparison of the previous releases of Captain Kronos. I mean, there was... I guess it would have been from Hammer themselves. They put out literally a side by side, and it's just like, obviously it's night and day. But what really works here though is the fact that with the 4K, I mean, sometimes it can take away from an older movie. More certain errors are visible. More a film can look a little bit too cleaned up. But that's not the case here. The countryside setting, the outfits, the lavish buildings, the interiors, they come through. This is where a 4K really, really works. That sort of upgrade. And that's with no mention of the sound, with a new Dolby Atmos and 5.1 mixes for all 3 versions of the film. Now, away from the film, the look and the sound of Captain Kronos, that is, this release features a frankly ridiculous amount of extras. Sure, we may be lacking a proper classic, making of documentary, but given how so many key Kronos players are sadly no longer with us, it would be kind of difficult to do such a documentary, I guess. What we do have, though, is a brilliant hour-long look at the life and career of writer-director Brian Clements. We get to take a tour of the Clements home, hear from his family and friends, even at one point get to see some of the external sites where Captain Kronos was filmed. There's also a really nice, I found it really nice, really heartwarming introduction to Captain Kronos from Caroline Munro. That's actually brand new for this release. Plus, there's a similar introduction as well from Brian Clements' sons, Sam and George. Then you've got all 3 of Caroline, Sam, and George together for a new commentary track to go alongside 4 previous commentary tracks, 3 of which I believe feature Brian Clements himself. There's also a 2013 introduction to the film from Brian Clements, plus a couple of really fascinating old interviews with him as well, and interviews with Horst Janssen and Lois Dane. And if that wasn't enough, there is more. There's a 2008 featurette on Captain Kronos. There's a featurette looking at the wider world of Hammer, which I'm always here for some of that. Plus the usual trailers, radio spots, galleries, etc. that you'd normally get with such a release like this. Again, though, that is just what's on disc. For this new release is quite the impressive package away from just the discs itself. Because, I mean, I should clarify, the version of Captain Kronos I received, that I was sent, it was just the, as we call, the check discs, as in slipcases with 5 discs in. There was no packaging, it was just the 5 discs and what was on those discs. What I didn't get to check out though, what's also included with this stacked release, there's a 136-page booklet about the movie, there's a 100-page reprint of the old House of Hammer Kronos strips, there's 8 art cards, there's a double-sided poster, and all of this is wrapped in a high-end slipcase. And of course, there is some inner box artwork from the brilliant Graham Humphreys, who just done so much phenomenal work for so many years now, that fella. What an absolute talent. So yeah, there is a lot going on with this new Captain Kronos release. And to be fair, this release immediately, I mean, it had me on side straight away. As soon as it rolls its Hammer introduction sequence, like how when you watch an MCU movie and you have that little montage of clips and characters from that world at the beginning, so it's like, oh yeah, there's Captain America, there's Black Panther, there's whatever, all these characters popping up, and it's just that badger is what I'm on about. Yeah, here, as soon as you put literally the first disc in, you don't have to press play. All you get then is just, you get one of those montage sequences of Hammer, and it's just like, yeah, that immediately had me on side. And obviously it all ends with Christopher Lee's Dracula being the final thing you see. So if you're looking for a rating for all of this, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at it. There is the movie itself, and then there's the extras that come with it. As a movie, Captain Kronos, it is right in my wheelhouse. That classic Hammer feel. A film set in the countryside and with the folk vibe that comes with it. A little like, say, I don't know, Witchfinder General, I guess. I'd probably, for the film itself, give it a solid 3.5 out of 5, 7 out of 10 for me, if you will. But that's for everything else that's included. I mean, it's hard not to dole out, a solid 10 out of 10 for the special features. There's the box art, the booklets, the comics, the trinkets, all the stuff that's on disc, all the extra stuff. Literally, like I said, 5 discs worth of goodness you have here. 5 discs, delightful discs. So for those who are fans already of Captain Kronos, this release, it should be an absolute must-have and must-buy. And for those maybe not too familiar with this 1974 film, I'd fully recommend picking this one up as something to check out. I mean, at the moment, cause it's just come out, it's £50 here in the UK. Maybe if you're unsure, maybe wait for that price point to drop a little bit, but it's absolutely well worth getting if you're asking me. And if you're watching this, maybe you do care about that opinion. So I don't know. But that brings this latest review to an end. While you're here, again, be sure to check out our recent reviews of Dark Match, the new Street Trash, Blackwater Lane, and The Damned as well. There's a review of that, which is still showing in select cinemas here in the UK and I believe in the US. So this has been What Culture Horror. I've been Andrew Pollard. Be well, stay safe, and I will catch you down the road.